woodman's tyranny. Another Schinkel design may give a clue to the fatal entanglement of that Europe. Here, a fairy tale vision he would sketch for the same Charlotte and her husband Nicholas I, that Iron Tsar, a monstrous, somehow Greco-Moorish palace never built, by the Black Sea on the Crimea. It is the sort of exhibition Hearst would first spring on America, at some cost to Jeffersonian democracy. Would R.C. Woodville's 1851 irony of the man shrouded behind dark glasses searching the news in The Spy while he waits with others for a stagecoach have let it out that the father's trust in a free press to bring truth to a free people might, as the blind lead the blind in Bruegel, end in the ditch of slogan sale and media debauchery, as when the children turn on the telly and soul cries out, "Who let the enemy in the house?" Surely a prophet could have seen that when neglect of Rousseau's dictum, because the force of circumstance tends always to destroy equality, the force of legislation must tend to maintain it, had installed plutocracy, even our balanced freedoms would join the death dance of the planet, that great kermesse of arrogation strung from the maypole of the twin towers of world trade, out through all competing nations and bank colonies, to the last burning of jungles for the brief agricultural failure the tropics allow. As Prometheus says in Aeschylus, "Besides this, I gave them fire." So freedom chases the old beast around the tree until the pursuer becomes the pursued, hounded to death in the hunt for happiness. Thus our lot, too, may harden to a planned order of the whole, our freedom death, our life road regimen. Around the 1800 switch from loose rein to curb rein, when a liberation still functional in America veered in revolutionary France toward the control of Europe, in that explosion of hope, how deeply David's unfinished 1797 Napoleon is cloven. So in Rousseau's Social Contract, does the general will ask Jefferson's state of minimal interference, or the maximal state Marx would infer from the same text, Rousseau? The general will is always right and tends to the public advantage, but it does not follow that the deliberations of the people have always the same rectitude. Some must have their wills made conformable to their reason, and others must be taught what it is they will. From thence is born the necessity of a legislator. In that lawgiver, proclaiming like a shaman the general will, sovereign over all, lurked the Revolutionary Republic of Virtue, 1793, when the Council of the Commune would require the destruction of all relics of superstition and feudalism. Here, from Notre Dame, a face of Gothic humanity, buried almost 200 years. Under Hébert, Notre Dame became the temple of reason, where the nude dancer Maillard impersonated truth, until the scandal of her rights gave deist Robespierre cause for guillotining the radical faction, extremists in extremis.
Die Augen schließ ich wieder, noch schlägt das Herz so warm.
Two phrases from Schubert's Winterreise occasion two images from a dream of spring, Frühlingstraum, where the frost on the window suggests leaves and flowers. The incalculable yearning of the tearful major has summoned Caspar David Friedrich's pen magic of the searching transcendental self. Against which Schubert's mood breaks into proud defiance. If there are no gods on earth, we will be gods ourselves.
Will kein Gott auf Erden sein, sind wir selber Götter.
The urge to that was already in Friedrich's longing, as it had been in Goethe, but Jericho's nude gives it the desperate muscle of Napoleonic France, prophetic rumblings from the tragic continent. While here the confrontation was delayed, not yet the Promethean vaunt or fatal rupture. Yet the very energy and expansive success of America, Chicago, from the fort and trading post of 1831, through the spur and stimulus of the Great Fire of 1871, to the 1892 spread of shipping and trade, industry and housing, that surge of powers would launch us on some such tragic risk as Promethean Greece had signalized. Since our freedom of quest, Adam Smith's quick and happy way to clear a land and build a booming nation rested on what had long sustained the prosperity of Europe, that taming of nature, which ties this Van Vianen 1600 log rafting down some German river to Lucas Susquehanna of 1872, America still counting on what Smith and Marx both assume, their common and fatal error, that nature is inexhaustible and works gratuitously. But we know too well what price nature exacts, we who face the extremes of a changing climate, Gaia's great storms and droughts. Summer 1988, these barges stranded on the old Father of Waters near my hometown of Greenville, Mississippi. We who feel the more actinic rays of the sun, who experience polluted streams, trashed beaches, garbage fills, the old timber clear cut from the ranges, and we shall know and feel more as the world pinch for food and water, raw materials and energy advances. Consider the rise and fall of dinosaurs. Such adaptive radiation and Earth seizure must throw life balances, genetic or social, out of whack. Organic causality is a complex interplay. The fall of comets or of asteroids could only have posed a general challenge, which in fact fishes in the sea, even sharks, first birds in the air, reptile sprawlers, lizards, snakes, and crocodiles, besides early mammals, managed to live through, where all ruling reptiles, dinosaurs, large or small, of diverse orders, in ocean, air, and all continents, became extinct. External impingement hardly accounts for so selective a catastrophe, from which man should learn, if learning is possible. Since the human assault on the globe, through mechanized war and peace, capitalist, communist, third world, exhibits some such unorganized chain reaction as must have marked the evolutionary crisis of the higher reptiles, some irreversibility of cultural as of genetic process. Take the burning of coal for an always unchecked upward spiral of population and energy demand. Here the Four Corners plant, San Juan, New Mexico, belching dioxides of carbon and sulfur. The feedbacks are enormously complex, say company scientists, meaning we can't act because we can't be sure, while the production of solar panels is neglected or suppressed. Hardly cost-effective, deceiving and deceived by an economics of the fragmented particular, which obscures the cost of greenhouse gases and acid rain. Fourier at the beginning and Arrhenius at the end of the last century had linked carbon dioxide to climate. I heard of it in 1934 from Barr at Virginia. Meanwhile, industry has plunged dead ahead. No doubt one reads now of sustainable development, and that such polluting power plants as this on the Ganges fail to comply. But how is book knowledge to change the politics of need and greed? Worst of all, when the so-called planned societies, who took up the banner of world hope, plan nothing but police enforcement of their own dogmatic rule, blind to the tensile tie of means and ends, materialist hicks, who, as Simone Weil said, have fallen to the top in the gravity of power. This Romanian town of Copsamica, become, under suppression of comment, the most polluted place on earth. And those other hicks on the western side, who call themselves political scientists and economists, and who take pride in having persuaded America that plan is a dirty word, all incapable of polyvalent thinking, as if an essential ingredient, Adam Smith's free enterprise or Marx's labor, were the entire recipe and cause of prosperity or of value. They deplore organic analogies, but the goal-directed symbiosis of the body is not totalitarian. Evolution has endowed its cells with genes of common loyalty and service, for each to pursue its own gain, as our politicians, bankers, and realtors do, would be cancerous. That is where the media have let democracy down. They should have built a gene pool conscience of the race. Observe this microphage white blood cell pouring itself out after bacteria. That is the immune response. You see no policeman but the cell itself, no central authority, nor with this hoplite, wrapping invaders in arrowed pseudopods. He is on his own. But the whole action is moral, and for the whole. It is only by plan that we can salvage the earth, but not a plan of the dumb and tyrannical. We have to constitute a feedback community of observing and governing intelligence, some many-minded Odyssean navigator. This program smacks of a new religion, a love and worship of the mothering earth floating at ease in the cosmos. But we cannot simply trust to Tellus Gaia. If that orb is alive, it is vulnerable, like every living being, to sickness and death, our death. We must intensify science to keep it green, but a new science of the mysterious whole, redeemed from short-sighted bondage to logic, profit, and war. So we scheme, while revolutions of 2 centuries have heightened at once intemperate hope and violence. After the French Reign of Terror and Napoleon came the inconsequential Paris uprising of 1830, which would only change one Bourbon for another. Yet to what crux of reckless zeal Delacroix has lashed it in his Liberty Leading the People. Next, the workers' insurrection and brief commune of 1848, just when Marx and Engels had released their manifesto, would prompt Daumier's partisan response, as in this Les Miserables group on the barricades. In a calmer century, Rousseau had doubted the emergence of good laws from civil strife and hatred. Many governments have been established in war, famine, or sedition, but they are the very governments that destroy the state. The choice of the time for instituting any law is one of the surest criteria, whether it be the work of a legislator or tyrant. Prophetic condemnation of militant prophets, whether of left, right, or middle. So the manifesto. The communist's ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. Of which it could be asked, what's all that hate doing in there? Though the curse of hate would fall on all parties, the child, father to the man. This between wars trio of Mussolini, Wilson, Lenin, all fatefully snared. The tide has swept us forward. However, 1905 to 6 is the date of the first Russian Revolution. Such a frenzy of defiant hope, joined with Nietzschean scorn, we have to be destroyers, as in this poster, Chains Broken, heightens the petition and massacre of the same year, while in music, Scriabin's 1907 poem of ecstasy cradles its Orphic egg of explosive yearnings, a complicity of yea shouts and poignant cries. So Kustodiev's absolute peasant worker giant, trampling and shattering the established city, stirs the privileged to alarm and hate, a wizard of terror that blasts the great rebel to a skeleton, trailing blood and fire. As it counterblasts those of station to the beast and enemy, this gold-greedy hog of Capitol. What can it mean that Shostakovich, in the climactic forte of his withdrawn Fourth Symphony, 2.5 minutes of inwrought percussive dissonance, cleaves the stark violence of two great wars and of revolution from its former ecstasy, crusting the volcanic brew of Eisenstein's 10 Days That Shook the World? Drums, cannon, crop and allied, shell both fronts. West and east, the carnage of trench warfare. Spent Russia still lashed to the field, this poster for 5.5% war bonds. From April 1917 on, Lenin was there. With Trotsky below, the end justifies all means. Trotsky to workers on strike and petitioning revolutionary sailors, I'll shoot you like pheasants. In that kindled pyre of burning, looting, purging, starving, the population of Petrograd fell from 2.5 million to 500,000. All parties, white, red, socialist, espoused terrorism. Production failed. Money more or less disappeared. By 1921, when Trotsky had broken the Civil War, famine and disease were rife. Even cannibalism surfaced. These butchers of the human dead. Lenin, we are beggars, hungry, ruined beggars. Yet hate laid the blame. Why not? On the swollen capitalist powers, France, the USA, England. What ecstasy could remain once the plotting exterminator of the old Soviet vanguard, Stalin, had tightened his rule? Meanwhile, the war of left and right spread over the world. Spain, refugees by a gutted farm, turned to France. Ironic chance that the only appearance in these shows of the Great Chinese War is for the 1937 movement of troops in the Sino-Japanese War, from which the most appalling pictures show the bombing of Chongqing, with the air raid slaughter of women and children. Then it was the Nazi build-up for the assault on Europe, London, Moscow. I will repay, saith the Lord. Wesel on the Rhine, north of the Ruhr. Could the climax be other than the atomic cloud of which Oppenheimer averred, I am Shiva, destroyer of worlds? Here, Shostakovich clang of ordnance gives way to a muffled span of brooding, dark as the trial of the Jews, or Russia's Gulag archipelago, or the no-win aftermaths of Cold War, Korea, 1950, Vietnam, 1966, phosphorus bombs on a jungle village. These brasses smoldering like Soviet misrule in East Europe, down to the fired palace of Romanian Ceausescu. What is the prophecy? What most of all when Shostakovich, after such intensities of attack and repression, distills for the symphony's close a space of mysterious intimation, sprinkled with rising arpeggios of the heavenly celeste. Who can hear it as the pealing bells of an orthodox past? Or attach it to the frail posters of Soviet hope, the exploded delight of this 1917 May Day? Exiled Kandinsky's spiritual abstractions, this 1926 rapture of several circles, seem nearer. If such was the art affinity, no wonder Shostakovich withdrew the fourth. But if prophecy, why not of the coming wave of liberation? This joyful breaching of the Berlin Wall, Christmas 1989. Or is that promise as vain as the other claims? Some open throttle drive to supermarket expansion, consumer goods, and energy. Could even Havel's victory sign, made over the streets of Prague, erase the unsolved troubles of the West, which had brought in rigors of right and left? Or can today's spendthrift opulence obscure our own crisis of inequality and foreclosure, racial slums, violence, the speculative wars Marx deceived himself to avoid? But our fate is intensified by what Marx was blind to. Everywhere the power of an earth rape, defiant of plan, whelming nature in wastes of productivity and poisons of science. Through such build-up in the mechanized ravage of war, the ecological havoc of peace, the globe with all its creatures, chiefly man, is snared like this dolphin, whose dying eye looks through nylon strands of a 35-mile ocean-exhausting drift net. So a centennial question mounts like an ancient prayer, whether the reconstructive earth, here suggested as through past wars by the guardian angel over Chartres, can so far assert itself as to avoid impending catastrophe. That question is being tested moment by moment. It has even of late almost been answered in the negative. Appalling, the intensity of faith and will it took to produce civilization, to rear Egypt and Mesopotamia from the bogs of pre-agricultural man, both peoples Semitic, of kindred yet warring tribes. Here from Egypt, Saqqara, third dynasty of the Step Pyramid, about 2660 BC, King Zoser's mutilated statue, its jewel eyes gouged out by later Vandals. And from 2700 BC, Sumeria, a gypsum orant, now in the Baghdad Museum, menaced perhaps by bombs. As if the daimonic force it took to found higher culture must become, in the reactive chemistry of place and race, the bane of its continuance. Let two relics bridge the millennia since those origins, 9th century BC and after, reliefs of hunting and war, to be transported wholesale from palace ruins of Assyrian conquerors to the British Museum. And, shrine of the conquered, this rock of Masada, where the Jews, most God-inspired, maligned and persecuted of those people, chose in 70 AD mass suicide, men, women, and children, rather than submit to Rome, a two-edged precedent. It is in these faith cradles of civilization that the question of its future looms. Now, when the will and drive of the whole United Nations, free enterprise, communist, third world, should be creatively focused on a rethinking and reordering of everything: population, diversity, production, distribution, resources, energy, where every leader needs to plan and implement vision. This imbroglio of desert and crescent shows leadership impotent, but for bungling to the chaos of war. To have fostered and armed a gambler like Saddam Hussein, as reckless as unprincipled, for manifest aggression, until, tempted by our own devil, we espouse the mischief, down to our saturation plane and missile bombing, his oil sabotage of the Persian Gulf. In a world so dangerously poised, so bereft of formative control, so driven to catabolic stampede, the balance Zeus and Jove hung in the sky must read global catastrophe, advancing at its own chain reactive rate. That fact seems less in question than whether the calamity will be total or corrective. Here, the Janus counsel of wisdom should be to work for corrective containment, although aware that the cosmos we praise may, among countless worlds, already have seeded, by our connivance, the miscarriage of earth. And yet those heavenly scales span a contradiction. Do they herald a fate, or from the name Libra, a libration? In Daniel 5:27, God, under that image, warns Belshazzar, "Thou art weighed in the balance and found wanting." Milton follows in Paradise Lost. The fiend looked up and knew his mounted scale aloft. So in this Memling judgment, the good soul to the angel's right settles like gold, the sinner rises like dross. Contrast the Iliad. The father balanced his golden scales. The Achaeans' death day was heaviest. Here, down is bad, as with Van der Weyden's sinking sinner on the angel's left. But the paradox is not the ambiguity of up and down. It is of gravity and spirit, that the weighing of souls, swayed in this autant carving by angel and devil, must share with life some more than quantum uncertainty. So too with the fate of the world. It is not determined but probable. Man's conscious feedbacks may cross the threshold of surprise, almost of miracle. We have again to assess the odds more searchingly, beginning with the wheel and arrow projections of history, while the organizing power and fate of all our shows draws to this here and now, as in the plants of Goethe's Metamorphosis. When the plant vegetates, flowers, fructifies, it is still the same organs which under protean shape expand as leaves, contract to the calyx, expand again in a petalled crown, contract to the organs of reproduction, then expand for the last time as fruit. What is new in Vico's Science of Cycles of 1725 and 44? That his nations are less political states than cultures, that their causality shifts from what is outward as war